I thank my colleagues for joining us today. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Border Security and Enforcement hearing on Title 42 and the preparations leading up to Title 42. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine the Department of Homeland Security's what we perceive as a failure to prepare for the termination of Title 42. We're going to discuss that today. I welcome our witnesses, and I very much appreciate their professionalism and taking their time to be with us today. However, I'm very disappointed that the Department of Homeland Security declined our request for a third witness, that being someone from senior chain with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And we're going to discuss why we believe that particular witness was withheld. I'm also concerned that the witness's testimony, written testimony, was not made available to this committee until late in the evening yesterday, rather late at night, well after normal business hours, despite the deadline for written testimony being last Friday. We're going to inquire about that during the course of today's hearing, because what we seek, the truth on this committee, requires transparency and cooperative effort. When we have a deadline for a written testimony, that's when we expect to receive the written testimony. I suspect that our panelists provided that testimony, but it was slow-rolled by the department. We'll see. We'll dig into that today. So despite what Secretary Mayorkas and other officials at DHS are advising the American public regarding the numbers being down, what we've come to observe is rather a shell game in the way numbers are actually documented and reported. The numbers of human beings crossing into America without appropriate documentation are indeed still at the record levels that we saw prior to the end of Title 42. But the classification of those human beings and the way they're brought into the country has been very cleverly changed by the administration. And we seek clarity on that today. We'll ask questions extensively from both sides of the aisle, again, seeking truth. And there's no benefit to any of us to conceal the actual numbers and the truth regarding immigration, both legal and illegal. So to reclassify illegal entry as those that have entered by a legal pathway and then tell the American people, well, the numbers are way down. You know, we have this thing under control. This is misleading by design, and we're going to dig into that today. The CBP-1 app is being used as a type of asylum application, very broadly, allowing those who register with it to move to the front of the line at ports of entry, be processed quickly into the United States as an asylum seeker without the normal asylum process and vetting. These migrants would have attempted to enter the U.S. between ports of entry and would have been considered illegal aliens and intercepted or encountered by Border Patrol between the ports of entry. But they're being pushed back. If they make it through the NGOs in Central America and Mexico, where many are being intercepted and quite effectively redirected through the ports of entry using the CBP-1 app, the ones that make it to the border are being turned around. Steady increase in what you refer to as voluntary return. And they're being sent back deeper into Mexico, where they're received by NGOs and they're assisted to fill out the CBP-1 app, and then they're being bused to the ports of entry, and they're entering in that manner through what the administration is calling a legal pathway. So then they tell America that the numbers of illegal migrants are down. It's a shell game. We're going to expose it today. We're going to do so respectfully, but quite aggressively. And I appreciate the opportunity to have presented this opening statement. I yield the balance of my time, and I recognize for his opening statement my friend and colleague, Ranking Member Correa.
Chairman Higgins, first of all, let me thank you very much for holding this most important hearing. What I want to do is get down to the facts, make sure we know what's going on at the border. As policymakers on both sides of the aisle, we have to recognize the challenges that we have as a nation. And it's important to start by looking back over the last few years and what we've seen, to look forward as to what we can expect. Mr. Chairman, we've dealt with COVID-19. And America spent trillions in fighting COVID-19, and we did pretty well. In fact, our economy is doing better than any other economy in the world today. Record unemployment, worker shortages. And this is happening while, sadly, the rest of the world, the rest of world economies are really crumbling. Even the great China economy is having trouble getting back on its feet. I'd like to submit without objection, this article from the Wall Street Journal talks about China's fading recovery reveals deeper economic struggles.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we now have is a worldwide economic crisis that has led to worldwide economic crisis. And there's never been more misplaced individuals, probably in the last 100, 200 years in this world. World War II, 60 million individuals on the move. Today, we've confirmed it, a greater number of individuals moving throughout the world displaced. This chart, if I can, from the UN Refugee Agency, shows the number of displaced persons, those in need of international protection, and asylum seekers just in the Americas. And as you can see from this chart, countries around the region, in this region, are suffering the challenge of refugees. Mexico is dealing with the refugee crisis within its borders, struggling. Guatemala is struggling. Europe, of course, is also feeling the stress. Further south in Colombia, not only is it hosting 2.5 million Venezuelan refugees, but others as well. And of course, these refugees are facing terrible conditions as they move north, looking for safety and opportunity. This next picture I'm going to show you is of a little girl struggling to continue north across the Darien Gap. She's separated from her mother and is being helped by another refugee trying to survive in that very dangerous region as they move north. And if those refugees are willing to take that journey north, you know there's desperation. So when we look at the post-COVID-19 world, we have to look at the challenges as a nation. And let me start by saying Title 42 was a pandemic policy that was supposed to end when COVID ended as well. The party in charge of the House of Representatives voted to end the COVID-19 pandemic, and in doing so, voted to end or lift Title 42. And I have to say I agree with them, because Title 42 is an issue dealing with pandemics, health issues, and not an immigration instrument tool. Looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the recent encounters at the border. And I ask again that you talk about the numbers. And as you do, you keep in mind the current challenges and the upcoming challenges, because this refugee challenge is not going away. I've been to Central America, and those nations, their infrastructures are devastated, and it's going to take a lot to get them back on their feet. Also, nearby, I visited all the CBP facilities that I could over the last few months on our southern border, in the months leading up to the lifting of Title 42. I've also visited San Diego before and after 42. On every trip I would take, I would ask our officers at the border, are we prepared for May 11th? Are we ready? And they would say, yes, we are, to the best of our ability and based on assumptions that we made on the numbers of individuals we're assuming will be here. And you know what? They did a really good job. And it wasn't just CBP, it was DHS, State Department, the administration. They did a good job. In those first few days after Title 42 ended, the encounters dropped at the border by more than half. In fact, if you look at this next chart, those are the numbers reported by Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz, showing more than a 50% drop in encounters since the ending of 42. These numbers continue to remain lower than what they were seeing earlier this spring, despite the fact that there's usually a normal increase at this time of the year. That is a seasonal increase. Let me just repeat some of the things the administration did. They opened up regional processing centers in which CBP agents told me that they will very helpful in managing the capacity of processing individuals at the border. The administration created legal pathways for Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans to enter the United States legally. The administration sent active duty military personnel to help with the logistics and expected surges at the border. And by the way, California sent the National Guard and Texas sent the National Guard as well. While I disagree with some of the consequences put in place at the border, some of the penalties in place at the border following the end of Title 42, they appear to be part of what has happened at the border today. And I would say that as a body, as a legislative body, we've got a lot of work to do. The refugee crisis is not going away. It's got to be addressed on a continent basis. South of the border, these are our neighbors. They're not going to move. They're going to be hanging out for a while. And we have to address the challenges south of the border. And I'd welcome the chairman and others to visit with me, countries south of the border, to address the root causes of migration, to make sure that we prepare for the long term. We can fight each other, point at each other, but we're talking about solutions in our continent, in our backyard. Though we roll up our sleeves and figure it out, we're going to continue to bicker and fight amongst each other, and nothing's going to get done long term. So today, from our witnesses, I look forward to hearing your testimony, what you think has led to this, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to say a decline, but management of the border. Was there a decline? What were the solutions you put in place? And what we can expect going forward. Again, I don't believe this chapter is over in this refugee crisis. COVID-19 is still with us. It's devastated the continent, the world, and we're the only game in town. Like it or not, we are the greatest, strongest economy in the world. With that, Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for my time, and I turn over to you.
I thank my friend, Ranking Member Correa. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic. And I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, gentlemen. Please be seated. I'd like to now formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Blas Nunez Neto has been serving as the Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration Policy since October the 1st, 2021. Mr. Nunez Neto has nearly 20 years of Homeland Security experience and previously served as the Chief Operating Officer at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Mr. Benjamin Carey Huffman is the Acting Deputy Commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, where he oversees the daily operation of CBP's expansive mission, including matters related to trade, travel, and national security. Mr. Huffman entered duty with the U.S. Border Patrol on February the 3rd, 1985, as a member of the Border Patrol Academy Class 173. I thank our witnesses for being here today, and I now recognize Assistant Secretary Nunez Neto for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Higgins, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. DHS led a comprehensive planning effort for more than 18 months to prepare for the end of Title 42. This effort included record deployments of personnel, infrastructure, and resources to support our front line. We also developed a series of policy measures intended to disincentivize unlawful entries at the land border while incentivizing migrants to use safe, orderly, and lawful processes and pathways to come to the United States. The end of Title 42 on May 12th allowed DHS to once again impose consequences at the border. Unlike an expulsion under Title 42, removal under Title 8 carries with it a minimum 5-year bar to reentry and the potential to be prosecuted for repeated reentries. In the weeks since May 12th, DHS has overseen a whole-of-government effort that has reduced unlawful entries between our ports of entry by 70%. We did so even as Congress appropriated less than half of the $4.9 billion that DHS requested to prepare for the end of Title 42. As part of these efforts, we strengthened the consequences for those who are apprehended crossing the border unlawfully through the new Lawful Pathways Rule. This rule places common-sense conditions on asylum eligibility for migrants who do not use the lawful pathways and processes that we have dramatically expanded over the last year. Since May 12th, USCIS has conducted a record number of credible fear interviews, more than 13,000, for migrants placed in expedited removal. We have repatriated over 38,400 single adults and families to more than 80 countries, including over 1,400 nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela who were returned to Mexico under our Title VIII authorities. This is the first time in our bilateral history that the government of Mexico has allowed the repatriation of non-Mexican nationals at the border under our Title VIII authorities. DHS has made clear through these efforts that there are serious consequences for unlawful entry. However, consequences are by themselves not sufficient to deter migration. To be most effective, the consequences we enforce must be paired with incentives for migrants to use lawful processes. And this administration has overseen a historic increase in access to lawful processes for migrants to come to the United States in a safe and orderly manner that takes them out of the hands of the drug cartels and the coyotes. These processes include supporter-based parole processes for nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, which have significantly reduced unlawful entries at the border. They include a 300% increase since 2019 in temporary work visas available for migrants in the region, and a dramatic expansion of refugee resettlement in the Western Hemisphere. The recently announced safe mobility offices in Guatemala and Colombia will also allow migrants to be referred to legal pathways not just to the United States, but to other partner countries, including Canada and Spain, that are participating in this effort. And we have also significantly expanded orderly access to our land border ports of entry through the CBP-1 mobile application, which allows us to process almost 4 times our pre-pandemic average of individuals at our land border ports of entry each day. Once again, the end result of this comprehensive effort has been a 70% decrease in unlawful entries between ports of entry since May 12th. However, We know that the conditions in the hemisphere that are driving the unprecedented movement of people, not just to our country, but to countries throughout the region, are still present, and that the cartels and the coyotes will continue to weaponize disinformation to put migrants' lives at risk for profit. I'd like to conclude by noting that these surges in migration have now become a regular occurrence for more than a decade under both Republican and Democratic administrations. Presidents of both parties have attempted to use their executive authorities to address these challenges, as we have. This, in turn, has invited litigation from both sides of the political spectrum and has resulted in courts across the country dictating border and immigration policy. It is abundantly clear that executive action alone cannot solve the entrenched challenge of irregular migration in our region, and that neither party can address its impact on our border by themselves. Until and unless the U.S. Congress comes together in a bipartisan way to address our broken immigration and asylum system, we will continue to see these surges in migration at our border. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your opening statement, and I now recognize Mr. Huffman for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Higgins, Ranking Member Correa, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to testify today on behalf of U.S. Customs and Border Protection's workforce and discuss our preparations for the termination of Title 42 Public Health Order. Before I cover those preparations, however, I want to take a moment to state how proud I am of the CBP workforce and how, time and again, they rise to meet any challenge thrown their way. I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that last month the U.S. Border Patrol celebrated their 99th anniversary since their establishment of May of 1924, and I've had the privilege of serving within their ranks for over 38 of those 99 years. CBP operates in an ever-evolving and dynamic environment, which is complex, demanding, and dangerous. The 64,000 men and women who make up CBP work in this environment under extreme stress. Stress not only as a result of the mission itself and the expectations of the nation we serve, but also acute personal stress. The last 3 years have been particularly difficult, exhaustive, and taxing, while extending our workforce to extreme limits. This period of time has required enormous sacrifices, the greatest of which has been the cost of the lives of our workforce. 64 line-of-duty deaths since 2020, of which 55 were attributed to COVID-19, and tragically another 36 employees who died by suicide. The leadership of CBP recognizes the stress and the well-being of our employees as the CBP's top priority. I am thankful for the support Congress has provided us for our dedicated workforce. Whether we're talking about the southwest border before, during, or after Title 42, CBP has seen considerable operational demands. Today, I would like to first highlight some of those challenges, and second, discuss how CBP prepared for the end of Title 42. First, the southwest border environment is immensely complex and can be dangerous. To that end, CBP continues to counter the threat of sophisticated transnational criminal organizations that profit from ruthless human and drug smuggling. When it comes to drugs such as illicit fentanyls, CBP is increasing our detection capabilities and working with our partners to dismantle production and trafficking. These efforts have led to results. In April, we surpassed the amount of fentanyl seized during all of fiscal year 2022. Special multi-agency operations such as Operation Blue Lotus and Four Horsemen amplified our efforts. In just 2 months, these operations led to the seizure of more than 5,700 pounds of fentanyl and 250 arrests. CBP is also responding to the historic flows of irregular migration as transnational criminal organizations take advantage and mislead migrants. In the course of combating these ruthless organizations, CBP regularly performs life-saving rescues and provides initial emergency medical care to those in distress in often extreme environments. As a result, CBP officers and agents have conducted nearly 3,700 rescue operations this year alone and provided life-saving assistance to more than 24,000 migrants. Which brings me to my second point. CBP, along with our DHS partners, have been planning and preparing for the end of Title 42. Our preparations align with CBP's overall strategy: prioritize and strengthen national and border security, enforce the rule of law, including human and civil rights, while implementing executive branch policies, provide for the safe, humane processing of migrants, and ensure the continued flow of lawful trade and travel. In anticipation of increased migration flows, CBP surged resources, technology, and personnel to encounter migrants crossing between ports of entry and to safely and thoroughly conduct immigration processing. This is done with a persistent focus on maintaining national and economic security with all of our preparations, considering how to care for and alleviate the stress upon our most important asset, our workforce. As we have done throughout our history, CBP has resumed fully using Title VIII immigration authorities. Title VIII provides meaningful consequences for unlawful border crossings, including expedited removal, a 5-year ban on U.S. admission, and criminal prosecution. In the days preceding the lifting of Title 42, CBP encounters with non-citizens between the ports of entry reached historic highs, approximately 10,000 a day. In the weeks since, the numbers have dropped by approximately 70%. At our ports of entry, we've recently been encountering over 1,250 non-citizens a day who have made appointments through the CBP One app mobile application. In closing, the border has always been a dynamic and complex environment, and as always, the CBP workforce will be prepared for any challenges that may come up. CBP will continue to do our part in enforcing the law, ensuring our workforce and individuals in our custody are properly cared for, and being a trusted partner to all others in this effort. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today, and I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. My colleagues and Americans watching this, the legislative branch of our government passes laws, and the executive branch historically works to enforce those laws. In a broad perspective, the executive branch is required to have a rule-making whereby the laws are interpreted and the means by which the enforcement of those laws shall be established across the country. This is reasonable and understandable. But federal law enforcement, especially when it comes to something as clear as enforcement of border and immigration law, is much less of a gray area. And the solution has been suggested here, one could argue that from my colleagues across the aisle, you've reached a solution, but it's not a solution within the parameters of enforcement of existing federal law as established by the United States Congress, and we are the legislative branch. So there's been an interesting interpretation of executive authority since January of 2021, whereby our current administration, if it doesn't like an existing law, it uses executive authority to find a way around that law. And that's what has happened with the incoming wave upon human wave of illegal migrants attempting to come into our country. The federal immigration laws that have been established by Congress have been essentially replaced by immigration policy that legalizes illegal entry into our country. And they tell you the numbers of illegal entry are down because this executive branch has redefined what an illegal entry is. The CBP One app goes down through Mexico and Central America into Colombia. And these migrant citizens, these children of God, who endeavor to enter our country, but they're undocumented, which makes them illegal. Historically, they would be intercepted at the border and handled appropriately. But this administration has changed that. They've diffused our border and essentially extended the American operations for border control down through South America and Central America and Mexico and established these so-called legal pathways. Let's see a quote, please. There you go. Put the quote up from Mr. Sir, do you recognize these quotes? This is not trick stuff. These are your quotes. Do you acknowledge it? These are your quotes?
I can't read that from here, unfortunately, but
Let me say,
looks
okay,
like me.
from an NPR interview recently, you say, you know, what we have done is really oversee a historic increase in lawful pathways to the United States, including at our ports of entry through the CBP One app. Do you acknowledge that you said that?
I do.
Thank you. And you went on to say, and what we're really trying to do here is incentivize migrants to use safe, lawful, and orderly pathways that, again, we have expanded dramatically over the last 2 years. Do you acknowledge that that's your quote?
I do, and it's also in my opening remarks.
Yes, sir. So what we're establishing here is that this executive branch has redefined what an illegal entry is. You admit that exact policy agenda. So when you report that illegal migrants, that the numbers are down, that's a shell game. It's like a magic trick. We were advised by Chief Ortiz in what I believe was his last confidential briefing that there were 657,000 immigrants in the pipeline south of the border. It was an interesting number because Chief didn't say between 600 and 700,000. He didn't say, 650,000, give or take. He said 657,000. That's quite a precise number. Mr. Hubman, Mr. Nunez-Nito, I'll just ask you each and I'll yield the balance of my time. Where are those 657,000 people headed?
So I have not seen that particular estimate. We do know that
It was from the chief. He's now retired, and my time has expired. Are they headed north?
We believe many of them are waiting for the lawful pathways and processes that we have
In order to come
established,
north?
not just in Mexico, but in other countries along the hemisphere.
They're headed here. Mr. Huffman, do you agree they're headed here?
A lot of them are headed here, yes, sir. Some of them have stayed in other countries. Like we know there's many of the Venezuelans have stopped and stayed in Colombia. So there's a lot of people in movement, but generally this direction, yes, sir.
And thank you for your answer, gentlemen, for being here. My time has expired. I recognize Ranking Member Correa for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow up with the chairman's last comment. 657,000, let's call it 700,000. Where do we get that intel to figure out that number? Either gentleman, please.
So, our Office of Intelligence and Analysis does estimate the number of people who are in the hemisphere and who may be moving north. The numbers I've seen don't quite match the 650,000, but, those are all rough estimates. I think we can all agree that there are hundreds of thousands of migrants throughout the hemisphere that...
But you do this with a partnership of others that work with us.
Of course, yeah.
And Mr. Hoffman, any thoughts on that number?
So, again, don't know the exact source of the Chief Ortiz's number. I've known Chief Ortiz a lot of years, and I'm sure he's extremely confident in that number if he gets that number. I just don't know the source of it. I am confident there are a lot of people moving in through the hemisphere, mostly headed this way. The exact numbers, it's hard to tell where they're going to stop, but yes, they are moving. People are moving this way. We see the news reports. We look at shelters that have people that are housing.
And Mr. Hoffman, again, I would invite folks, if we could put together a Codell to go visit some of these countries to see the devastation, and you don't have to argue that point here. People are hungry, devastated economies. They will find a place to survive, as that picture of that little girl showed. And I guess if I can, I would say that Mr. Chairman is right. What he showed in that poster was what I would call part of the hope, the opportunity to maybe figure out a way to employ a safe legal pathway. I would say the other two legs of that stool are penalties. Title VIII, there are severe penalties for trying to cross, not using a legal pathway. And the last one I want to focus on in my last 3 minutes are the cooperation piece. I think it's important because if we're going to move forward to address the issues in the hemisphere, specifically our southern border, we have to continue to work with our partners. You mentioned, for example, that Mexico is taking, for the first time ever, is taking repatriated individuals from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Are these people that are then repatriated to Mexico, do they stay in Mexico, or does Mexico repatriate them back to the other countries?
So that is really a question for the government of Mexico, but these are individuals that are, repatriated under our Title VIII authorities, which, as you know, it is the first time in our history Mexico is allowing that.
And so, in essentially, I believe what Mexico is doing, and I'll double check myself here, but I think they're providing with work visas and other opportunities to actually work. And you mentioned, was it you or that I read in that I listened to this morning in the news, that we are cooperating with Panama, Colombia, and other efforts across the hemisphere. And I hope that those are humanitarian efforts to address this refugee crisis and begin to figure out how to get a handle on this situation, because it is going to be with us for a number of years, in my opinion. But any thoughts on that, Mr. Huffman, Mr. Nunez?
So, if I may, I think, when someone arrives at our border, it is far too late. We need to engage regionally with our partner countries in order to address these flows well before they reach our border. What Colombia and Panama are doing right now is unprecedented. It is a coordinated binational operation in the Darien to try to attack the smuggling networks. We have been providing technical assistance. I know CBP has deployed personnel to assist in that. The Department of Defense has been active. And those are the kinds of things that we really need to do more of, because again, I think the more we can impact these flows well before our border, the better off.
Mr. Huffman, Mr. Huffman, my last 50 seconds, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. From an operational perspective, I would say that Mexico has cooperated with us more recently than I've seen in my career. The help they've been.
In your career is how many years?
38 years, sir.
Thank you.
They are increasing their enforcement efforts on their southern border as well, which is slowing the flow. They are redirecting folks that we have returned to Mexico and flying them back to their southern border to kind of add an extra consequence and deter them from coming to come north. And they're also helping redirect folks to our border to kind of slow them down as a way as well. So that's a very positive outcome, or that we've been having recently, and it's been very helpful, and I think it's part of the reason some of the flows have slowed down here recently.
I'd like to, with my last 3 seconds, say I do hope we continue to double down on the humanitarian aspect of this refugee crisis. Mr. Chairman, I ran out of time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. As Chairman Higgins indicated a few moments ago, roughly 2 weeks ago, Chief Ortiz was here on Capitol Hill briefing members of Congress, particularly members of this committee, about events that have transpired post-Title 42. And we had the opportunity to speak with him, and Chief Ortiz said that he believed that the reduction that we've seen post-Title 42, he described it as what he believed to be a temporary reduction, and that he expected the numbers to return at some point back to the baseline that we had seen over the last 2 years. And so my first question to both of you, do you agree with Chief Ortiz's assessment that the reduction that we've seen is more temporary in nature and that we will return to the baseline of the last 2 years, or do you believe that the reduction that we've seen is permanent in nature?
I would say that we're encouraged by what we've seen the last 3 weeks, but as I mentioned, we are clear-eyed that the factors in our hemisphere that are driving this historic movement of people are still there, and that smugglers use disinformation to drive migration. So this is a fragile equilibrium that we have on the border, and it could be upset in the future for sure.
I would agree with that statement. Also with Chief Ortiz, is that there's still numbers there in Mexico. I believe they've taken kind of a wait and see approach to see how this pans out. How do we stick to our guns with how we're enforcing the Title VIII rules, and see how that works out. So time will tell.
And then also, Chairman Higgins mentioned earlier some conversation about the CBP1 app. I know both of you mentioned that in your written testimony about the use of the CB1 app. We see that news reports show that the CB1 app, that there's roughly 1,000 immigrants a day who are able to apply for some sort of status within the United States using the CBP1 app. Recent report by Fox News talks about the administration is seeking to expand that very quickly to 40,000 a month. And so my question is when Congress receives information, the public receives information from DHS about Southwest land border encounters. Those numbers in March were 191,000 and some change. In April were 211,000 and some change. Are the individuals who are applying and entering the country through the CBP1 app, are those individuals included in the figures that we are receiving? Or are those individuals somewhere else not included in those numbers? Because that's very important for us to know exactly how many people are coming across the border, whether you're coming across illegally and claiming asylum or whether you're coming in by using the CBP1 app, presenting yourself at a port of entry. They're still being allowed into the country. And so we're trying to get at least I am, and I'm assuming others on this committee, we're trying to wrap our head around the true figure of individuals who are allowing to come into the country each and every month. And so are you aware of to how those numbers are calculated when you're talking about the Southwest land border encounter numbers that we routinely rely upon from CBP?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So my understanding is that when CBP issues its monthly reports, those numbers include encounters at ports of entry, which would include CBP1, and it also includes encounters between ports of entry, which obviously would not include CBP1. And I would also note that the Immigration and Nationality Act expressly authorizes individuals to present at ports of entry and claim asylum, and they must be processed. And we're actually under litigation right now that prevents the use of metering at the land border. So I know Chief Huffman has thoughts here, but the CBP1 app is really just a scheduling tool to allow us to let people who may wish to claim asylum present at a port of entry in a way that is safe and orderly and doesn't tie up our ports of entry.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir, those numbers in Women Counter, for example, I have the numbers running in my office every day, and they'll say like 4,500 apprehensions yesterday. That will include probably 3,000 to 4,000, 3,000 or so encounters by the Border Patrol, plus it includes the ones that applied for entry or presented themselves for entry using that being scheduled by the CBP1 app. And I want to emphasize something that's very important to us because concern is the CBP1 continues to get misconstrued. For us, it is nothing more than a scheduling tool. It allows us to have an orderly process at our ports of entry, because without that scheduling tool, all these people that are waiting and seeing would all be showing up at the same time and clogging up and shutting down our ports and impact trade, impact other people that have lawful ways into the country, the U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, those things. So we use the CBP1 as a scheduling tool to help us maintain that order at our ports, because we are not allowed to use our metering that we used to do due to a lawsuit a number of years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Thanadar, the gentleman from Michigan, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, the gentleman, for being here. I feel a strong personal connection to the issues we are discussing here today. You see, in 1979, at the age of 24, I was one of those immigrants with only a name, $20 in my pocket, and my American dream. Entering this country with no friends, no family, and very fearful about how I would survive in this new homeland. During summers between the academic school years, I was often forced to sleep in a car or sometimes in a homeless shelter funded by a faith-based non-government organization, NGOs. Now, you know, NGOs have played a crucial role for decades in providing care and support for migrants, including at the US border. In times of solitude, those NGOs could be the only aid an immigrant receives for weeks. Strengthening the capabilities of NGOs to receive individuals who are not citizens following their processing has been an essential aspect of Secretary America's preparation for lifting of Title 42. Mr. Nunes Neto, my question is, can you please expand on those NGOs' role at the border and why they remain vital to ensuring the treatments for the immigrants?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. As an immigrant myself, I think it is a sign of this country's strength that an immigrant like you could become a member of Congress and that one like me could achieve the kind of role I have at DHS. You know, Chief Huffman and I were just in Brownsville last week observing firsthand how the city government in Brownsville and the local NGOs process migrants as they are released from CBP custody or from ICE custody and allow them to connect with family members and move onwards to their final destination. These are non-citizens who are issued notices to appear and released to have their court proceedings as the law provides. Those NGOs and our city and state governments on the border are really playing a critical role in allowing migrants to be able to move onward and not remain at the border. I know CBP obviously relies a great deal on those relationships locally, and I'm sure Chief Huffman has some thoughts there as well.
Mr. Hoffman, after receiving my PhD in chemistry and a United States citizenship, I became a serial entrepreneur. In that time, I learned a lot about the importance of technological innovations in solving problems. Can you elaborate on the app's advantage both for applicants and CBP officers? How will CBP, and also how would CBP expand the availability of this system in coming months?
So, and thank you for the opportunity to respond. And as far as technology goes, technology is key for all aspects on ours, not just the CBP one, but how we do border security across the whole. The border now is a much more dynamic border than we've ever had in our history. And the folks that want to enter this country illegally or are traffickers, they can change the picture of the border with easy, fast, quick communication. So we have to be able to communicate as well, and we have to have the technology to respond as well as you. And the problems grow very rapidly, more rapidly than we can build our capacity. So the only way we actually increase our capacity oftentimes is with the use of innovation and technology, and that's what we've done in a number of areas. CBP app is one, how we process is another way, how we transport information is another way. All those things combined help us to be a much more agile response to whatever threat we see facing us.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman, and Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. My colleague, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Green, is recognized for questioning for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I have enjoyed learning about the CPB One app today. It's a pretty nifty little app. I just wanted to point out that, so if someone is illegally coming into our country, I call it illegally because I feel like a lot of them are in our country illegally, they can go to this app. And all they have to do is download CBP One. And they can come into Mexico, they can click on here and decide, are they a traveler, a broker, carrier, aircraft operator, bus operator, sea pilot, commercial truck driver, international organization. It's really interesting, though, the commercial truck driver one, doesn't work yet, which I think is a complete failure. When you click on commercial truck driver, it says coming soon. You would think that this app would want to keep track of, imports coming into our country. Trucks, agriculture, goods, whatever's bringing into the country. That's a really important fact and figure to keep track of. But if I am an individual and I'm coming into America, I can go on there and I can choose how I want to come in. I'm a pedestrian, so I click pedestrian. Let me tell you how great it is for people that are coming into our country that are not American citizens. They can find a wait time that fits their schedule. All they have to do is go on here and I can pick Calexico East, and I only have a 5-minute wait at a port of entry. And then I can look at this neat little graph that somehow tracks what time of the day is busier or less busy. But again, this app does not track or check trucks, commercial trucks coming into our country. And then here's what's really interesting. I find this very interesting. I can get a scheduled appointment, and it says you must be in central or northern Mexico to accept and schedule an appointment. So if I'm coming from China or Africa or whatever country in the world, I got to get my plane ticket to Mexico and then schedule my appointment so I can come into a port of entry. Now, here's the really interesting part. I would like our laws followed, but they're not followed right here on the CBP One app because it says that passports are optional. I think that's a big problem for people coming into our country and being told to go directly to the port of entry instead of course, going outside of the port of entries because that messes up the numbers. That apprehension numbers were off the chart, and that was a real problem for the Biden administration. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Nunes-Nito, why can't you tell us how many people are coming in the United States when you have a handy-dandy little app that you are tracking? You know the numbers. This is the American government. We put a man on the moon. We're able to count. Why can't you tell us how many so-called migrants are coming into our country?
So we do update the public and Congress on the number of people who are processed through the CBP One application, and I believe my testimony notes that since May 12th, we've been averaging about 1,070 individuals a day using the CBP One application, which again, as Chief Huffman noted, is just a scheduling tool that allows individuals who may wish to claim asylum to access the ports of entry as the Immigration and Nationality Act provides.
Well, can I ask you a question? This is something else I'm trying to understand now that we have an app to organize the illegal invasion into America so that everyone gets accepted, they have a time to come in, they say that they are seeking asylum, and then the American taxpayer gives them a plane ticket or a bus ticket to any town in the United States. Gosh, the American taxpayers are nice. Right here, it says that you say the reason why people are coming to America today is because of violence, food insecurity, severe poverty, corruption, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Did you know that there are over 500,000 homeless people in the United States today? And as a matter of fact, the homeless population rose significantly since 29. That's for Americans. So we have homelessness here in America. Natural disasters. Talk about climate change. This is the 4th largest country in the world. We have an extremely diverse climate. We have a wide range of natural disasters. 97 natural disasters occurred in 2021. I don't think this is very safe for migrants here in America. We had 97. How many are they having in their country? These natural disasters include wildfires, heat waves, droughts, flash floods, winter storms, cold waves, tropical cyclones, and on and on and on. But yet they need to come to our country because of climate change? That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not a safe country either, by the way. In America, there were 1,313,000 violent crimes in the U.S., and that was in 2020. I can't imagine what the numbers are since then, since crime has come up. I think that you need better reasons if you're going to try to let a bunch of people in the U.S. using a handy-dandy app where you don't track imports than climate change, because that is not an excuse people are buying. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields. Mr. Gonzalez, my colleague from Texas, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning. He's not here. Oh, yeah, Mr. Garcia is here, though. My colleague from California, Mr. Garcia, is here.
Close.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that we have an opportunity to speak with our witnesses today. Thank you for your service. That was an interesting conversation about the app, which I'll get to in a minute. But I want to just start off by talking about Title 42. And as a proud immigrant myself who believes in humane immigration, I think we all agree that a secure border is important and is vital. Our nation benefits when people have an opportunity to come here to build better lives, as you have, sir, and like I have as well. And other members of the Congress. I want to remind my colleagues in the majority that attempts to demonize immigrants and people who come here legally to seek asylum is un-American. Our country is a nation of immigrants, and we're constantly reinvigorated with immigrants, with their talents, and with their innovation. I know that some people here have been openly rooting for a post-Title 42 crisis as a way to score political points, but let's be very clear, that crisis did not happen. And this hearing is an attempt to manufacture one. Now, as has been stated, Border Patrol encounters are at the lowest point since 2020. That is a fact. Those are statistics that are widely accepted. They have been reviewed by our departments. They've been put out as information for us to assess, and I want to thank you all for your work with that. And it's also true that these numbers should be not celebrated, but welcomed as progress in our ability to control and secure the border. And I just really briefly want to just ask to get clarification for Mr. Blas Nunez-Neto. Would you agree, and do you support those numbers that we are at the lowest border encounters since 2020?
I believe if we're talking about encounters between ports of entry, that yes, we are at the lowest level since, I believe, December of 2020.
Thank you, sir. Now, I think a key reason for the conditions and why they've been improved also is the pathways for asylum seekers that we have focused on. So you've worked on, the entire department has been supportive of the CBP-1 app, and that continues to improve I think, outcomes for all, and for us here on the country, certainly for asylum seekers. I know we had a difficult rollout early on, but the department has also made really great progress, and I want to thank all the groups involved in getting the One App to where it is today. Now, I appreciate the gentle lady from Georgia's tutorial on the One App and how it works. I personally appreciate the use of technology and its way to actually facilitate information, collect data, and make things simpler for all involved, including those that are seeking asylum, who I should remind the committee and her have a legal right to actually claim in the United States of America. It's also important to note that the One App is actually allowing us to actually manage this crisis better here at home and at our ports of entry, and I want to thank you for that work. And I think claiming that the One App somehow is facilitating an invasion of the country is incredibly irresponsible. Asylum is a legal right in this country, and claiming asylum is so. And so until that changes, we need to continue to support this program and make it easier for folks and for us to manage anyone that's coming to the border or a port of entry, or now in many cases going to other parts of the hemisphere and seeking asylum there, which I think has been a very productive advancement that the Biden administration has done as well. I want to note that I support the administration's new efforts to create these regional processing centers in Central and South America, including Guatemala and Colombia, where we know migrants are receiving interviews with immigration officials, with specialists, and if eligible, are able to be processed rapidly for pathways to the U.S., if of course, they meet our standards. I also want to note that I hope that we can strengthen our shelter and services program, which supports groups like Catholic Charities that support legal asylum in our country. I think it's been unfortunate that members of this committee have tried to actually defund this critical program that essentially partners with nonprofit agencies to use federal funds to secure an orderly border. And so I hope that that's something that we can continue. And finally, I want to remind the committee that we have a responsibility to provide legal status and protections to the people who build lives and pay taxes here, and that's something that we can move forward on. Mr. Nunez-Neto, finally, what will the administration do to continue to expand legal pathways to protect the right of asylum while maintaining access to the border?
So as we have said, we are committed to continuing to expand lawful pathways and processes. I think you mentioned these safe mobility offices, which is what we're calling the regional processing centers. I view that, and we view that as really a fundamental tool to help better organize migration, not just to the US, but as I said, to some of our partner countries, including Canada and Spain, which have signed on, and we are in active discussions with other countries to allow for referrals to their processes as well.
Thank you very much, sir, and I yield back and thank you for your service.
I thank the gentleman, my colleague from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, gentlemen. And if the numbers that Mr. Correa and Mr. Garcia are talking about are in fact the truth, and those numbers are dropping, job well done. I'm a border state. I'm a Texas boy. I'm one of the landing zones for the illegal migration coming across the border. So if those numbers are dropping, absolutely, I applaud that effort, because that's what I need. That's what my base are asking me for every day. How do we control that situation? Mr. Nunez, ICE detention policy states that ICE uses its limited detention resources to detain non-citizens to secure their presence for immigration proceedings or removal from the United States, as well as those that are subject to mandatory detention, as outlined by the Immigration and Nationality Act, or those that ICE determines are a public safety or flight risk during the custody determination process. Now, in my district, I border Liberty County, Polk County and Liberty County. The population of Liberty County is roughly around 90,000. There are 50,000 illegal immigrants parked right on the border of my district and another member's district. Now, here's my issue, and I want your help solving this problem. We are a country of immigrants, absolutely. And my colleagues on the other side, they shine a very meaningful light on people in the process, and the struggle is real. I get it. And it's very challenging. But that number of illegal immigrants in that small area is scuttling that county. The school districts are absolutely overwhelmed. They're having to bring in teachers that speak Spanish because none of the children speak English. The area that they've occupied looks like a third world country. My question is, why doesn't ICE move on that and assist our county in the removal of those undocumented immigrants?
So, ICE's function is to obviously enforce our immigration laws and carry out, execute what we call final orders of removal. I don't know the circumstances in your county. I'd be happy to look into it. I will say ICE has never received enough funding to detain every individual we encounter. This has been the subject of active litigation. I think, as we have said repeatedly, we are a nation of laws and we're a nation of immigrants, and we need to be able to enforce our laws while also providing avenues for immigrants who wish to come to be able to come.
So I'm glad you said that. We are a nation of laws, and then so in that, we need to enforce those laws, but that's obviously not happening. And I don't know where the rub is between state, county, and local law and federal law, since these are our illegal immigrants that were processed. Some, not all, but some were processed in. How do I fix this problem, sir?
So again, without knowing the specific details, I'd be happy to follow up with your office. Individuals who are issued a notice to appear can go through the immigration court process, which can take many years. And it is an unfortunate reality in this country that our immigration and asylum system is so broken, that it does take an extraordinary time for people to go through that process. Individuals with final orders of removal, should be removed at the end of that process. But, historically, it has been quite difficult, again, under presidents of both parties to execute final orders of removal for people who are not detained.
Okay, to that, can you confirm for me, and this committee was in El Paso and down at the, I'm sorry, I forgot what the other place that we went. They told us that it is widely reported that aliens are released into the interior without court dates, regardless of whether or not they were issued at an NTA. Are those reports true? Do illegal migrants that come across, are they processed through without a show time or show place?
So historically, the Border Patrol has issued notices to appear without court dates on them until frankly fairly recently.
Or locations?
Right now, we are issuing NTAs with court dates on them. In the lead up to the lifting of Title 42, we were also, because of the
I hate to
strain
cut you
on
off, my
our
time's running
facilities-
short. Has that happened? Has illegal migrants come across and not been issued? Because we've heard from leadership that that is the case, but I want to hear what you have to say.
So we have paroled individuals in order to relieve the overcrowding in our facilities. Those individuals are required to report into ICE facilities and be issued NTAs there.
How on earth are we supposed to track those individuals if we're just releasing them basically on their own recognizance? I'm sorry, sir. Can you answer that for me? Or-
Would the gentleman like to answer that question?
Sure. Many of those individuals were placed into our Alternatives to Detention program, which does include monitoring. And so, we, as part of that program, more than 90% of the individuals who are released on ATD do in fact report to their ICE facilities.
Thank you, sir. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Higgins. Before, I want to thank both of you for being here today. Similar to Congressman Trinidad, I have a similar family of immigrant story, and actually, as I look around, I think all of us here have a history of family migrating here. It just depended on when we came. So I want to clarify a few things, and then I want to get into some questions. First, I've heard a lot of conversation about legal entrance versus illegal entrance to this country. And it's my understanding that the CBP app is a tool to do the scheduling, right? So that people can enter here seeking asylum legally, correct?
That's right. The CBP One app allows individuals to schedule their presentation at a port of entry, and our Immigration and Nationality Act expressly provides that people without documents can claim asylum at ports of entry.
So Mr. Nunez Neto, that means that if they're making that request, if they're filling out the app, as one of my colleagues just talked about, the filling out of the app, they show up to a port of entry and turn themselves in during that appointment, they are lawfully entering and seeking asylum, yes or no?
Individuals, and I welcome Chief Huffman's views here, but individuals who are processed by CBP at the ports of entry, will be placed into removal proceedings and issued a notice to appear. And they, as part of that process, the immigration court process, have a right to claim asylum, which again is enshrined in the INA.
And if someone requests asylum because of the fear or the extreme circumstances that they have experienced in their country, or maybe Mexico, or maybe Guatemala, or Honduras, or Nicaragua, or whatever country that they are fleeing from, or in the process of getting up north from, they go through the critical fear interviews, correct?
That is true for individuals who are placed into expedited removal at the border. That is a separate, more streamlined process that is primarily used for individuals encountered between ports of entry, although it can be used at ports of entry as well. And that's right, the credible fear interview, which is basically a broad screen as it was designed by Congress in the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows, frankly, most individuals who are going through that interview under normal circumstances to be screened in.
Got it. So I just want to come back to this concern. I really appreciate my colleagues on the other side being concerned for the children and the people that are crossing the border and the inhumane experiences that they go through. My youngest sister is adopted. She was 12 years old, weighed 60 pounds when she crossed unaccompanied more than 16 years ago. So I appreciate care for people like my family. The thing that I don't appreciate is the idea that they come to the border, they're at a school, or they're attempting to seek asylum like my little sister was, and all of a sudden we want ICE to deport them immediately to Mexico or to wherever their country of origin is. And in my opinion, having been in these countries for a very long time, months at a time, I personally know clearly what people are escaping. And so I know that if Edie's, my little sister, would have been deported immediately, if ICE would have came to the school and deported Edie's would have died within a month in Guatemala at the age of 12. So I actually have to push back on the other side and say that seeking asylum is not a crime. That is what many of our families have done. Maybe they did it now, maybe they're doing it today, maybe they did it 100 years ago. And so I'm really concerned, actually, when we talk about the number of people that have been repatriated or deported, because I'm not very clear yet on how many of the people that are requesting the critical fear interviews, in fact, are able to stay from immediate removal based on some of the training questions that I have. And I'll go ahead and send you some of that in advance so that I can get more information on that. I also want to mention, we've talked a lot about legal and illegal pathways. I do want to say that I appreciate the administration's commitment to identifying ways through some of the regional centers and other ways that asylum seekers can apply to be able to seek asylum here. While I don't think those are perfect and I don't think it solves our immigration issue or the cause of migration, I certainly think it's a path forward. I also do invite my colleagues, if they want to go to Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, my family's from the border there, happily to bring you with me, and we can talk and walk through some of those roads and get to know a little bit more of the immigrant experience. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. My colleague from Arizona, Mr. Crane, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate you bringing up the quote from Mr. Neto. I want to go through that quote really quick again, Mr. Neto. This is what you said. You know, what we have really done here is oversee a historic increase in lawful pathways to the U.S., including at our ports of entry through CBP-1 application. You most certainly have given us a historic increase, sir. And I want to go to a historic increase real quick. Just an example, just a couple days ago, not a couple years ago, but a couple days ago in Arizona, where I'm from. This is Fox News on 6/4/23. Border Patrol K-9 sniffs out $2 million in fentanyl during traffic stop in Arizona. Fox News. Mr. Huffman, are you aware of this story? Do you remember this one? Yeah. Border Patrol K-9 helped agents sniff out $2 million worth of smuggled fentanyl during a traffic stop in Arizona last week. The seizure happened at a checkpoint along I-8 near Yuma. Yuma Sector Chief Patrol Agent Patricia McGurk Daniel stated, the narcotics totaled more than 192 pounds, enough to kill 48 million people. Sir, I didn't say 48 people. I didn't say 48,000 people. I said 48 million people. That's exactly the historic increase that you all have brought to the United States of America. Now I want to go down to the second part of your quote where you say, and what we are really trying to do here is incentivize migrants to use safe, lawful, and orderly pathways that, again, we have expanded dramatically over the last 2 years. I want to focus in on one word, incentivize. That is exactly what you have done. And I know why you've done it, sir, because that's exactly what your boss did. He was doing that when he was campaigning for president. I actually got a chance to read his very quote to Secretary Mayorkas sitting in your chair like a month ago. If you guys were actually serious about securing this border and protecting Americans, that word would not be incentivized. You know what it would be, sir? It would be deter. I'll say it one more time. It would be deter. You guys would be trying to deter people. Now, I understand, my colleagues over here, they're talking about, folks trying to come here, migrants, and, because of one of my colleagues said he attributed our border crisis to global economic disaster, okay? I've said this in this committee before. This side of the aisle, we do love the fact that the United States of America is such a great country that people want to come here. As a matter of fact, we can all recognize that one of the great things about this country is that we do have a lot of immigrants here. But legal immigrants, that's what we want, sir. And because of the Biden open border policies, it is flooding people into this country, and it is tying up our Border Patrol agents to the tune of this story that I just read you. 48 million people could have died by the fentanyl that just came in Arizona 2 days ago. What do you think about that, sir?
Thank you for that question. I would note that 90% of the fentanyl that comes into the country comes through our ports of entry, not between our ports of entry. We have been engaged in an all-of-government...
Hold on a second, sir. How are you able to even calculate that when there's so many gotaways that come through, not through the port of entries, that you guys don't even get? How could you say that? The only numbers that you can calculate are based on...
Gentlemen, yield.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just going to say two separate issues, fentanyl. And earlier, we had a witness, my Orange County sheriff, that said a lot of the fentanyl precursors are now coming into the U.S. through our own ports of entry, then going south into Mexico for manufacturing. So I think it's a great, Mr. Crane, great issue, fentanyl. Love to set up another committee hearing to address this issue
Mr. Crane,
specifically.
I'm going
Yes,
to
sir.
claim back my time. Are you saying that fentanyl is not coming through the gaps? Or is that what you're saying, sir?
I'm saying, sir, that fentanyl is coming in from all parts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. So he's claiming that 98%, according to experts, is coming through the ports of entry. How can he possibly know that? Anybody in Border Patrol can tell you they don't have enough manpower, especially when a lot of our agents are busy processing people coming in through the country. They don't have enough manpower. That's why there's so many gotaways. That's why there's so many people on the terror watch list that are coming through the border as well.
And Mr. Crane, just to answer your question, I think he's talking, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but from experience, that's where most of the fentanyl is being caught right now, at the ports of entry. And I've been there like you have.
Caught. That's the key, caught. That's because that's where most of our people are.
if
There's
we
not a
double-
bunch,
and
there's
if
not the same
And we
percentage
double-
of people in the gap.
And if
that's
we
what I'm
doubled,
telling you.
and we doubled the number of uniforms, blue uniforms at those ports of entry, we would catch double the amount.
But you still aren't touching the gaps where there aren't people in the open desert. That's what we're talking about. There's video after video of people that just ranchers, good citizens that just go to the border, sit there with cameras and watch these people come in with backpacks. I live in Arizona, sir. I know you live in California, right?
So this is engaging debate. It's the kind of thing we should discuss, but the gentleman's time has expired. I recognize.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, for the record, we went to McAllen.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted that for the record. Popped
Again.
into my head. Sorry. Thank you.
Again, it's a 1,954-mile border, and some of us have scouted the entire thing on several occasions. I recognize my friend, Mr. Green from Texas, for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the committee for allowing me to participate as an interloper today. And Mr. Hoffman, I believe you indicated that the CBP is in its 99th year of existence.
So CBP is actually in its 20th year existence. The U.S. Border Patrol, one of the legacy agencies, is in its 99th year's existence.
Well, I want to just say thank you to all of the persons who do this work. I know it's not easy. In my old age, I'm starting to see both sides of things more and more. Just celebrated my 25th birthday for the third time. And there's some people who live on our side of this border who are suffering too. Just mentioned communities. They're suffering too. We need to do something about that. We need to do something about the people who are hungry, need to be fed. When I was thirsty, you gave me water. When I needed shelter, clothing, you gave me clothing. Somewhere around Matthew 25. It's a difficult problem. There is no real simple solution. There really isn't. If the solution were really simple, it would have been solved. There are better minds than have been here and had the opportunity. Mr. Nunez Neto, is that correct? Sir, you said that the conditions driving the migrants still exist. Could you just quickly articulate some of those conditions, please?
Sure. You know, we have seen over the last 2 years, at times, surges in migration from Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Those are countries with failing regimes and devastated economies that we have difficulties removing people to. That is still the case. You know, we have at times seen surges in migration of Haitian nationals. Haiti is obviously a place that is in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, and we have seen economies failing throughout Latin America, leading to the movement of countries to our border that we have not historically seen, and that includes countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, as well as some others.
Thank you. I heard someone say not so very long ago that the whole country's become the border now, that it's not just at the south where you make your entry. And when you think about that, we all have to share the burden. My governor has been putting people on buses and he just sends them. I don't approve of the way he's doing it, but I do think that giving people other places to migrate to other than just right at the border is not a bad idea. I think that we ought to try to work together to implement an idea. Why not call and say, we have some people here, one governor to another. We have some people, can you help us? The federal government steps in and says, we're gonna help by providing some additional resources. At some point, we will have to work together to resolve this. It's just not going to be resolved with simple sound bites. So I'm hoping that we can do so. Now, I want to just say this. I find Mr. Mayorkas to be a good, decent man. He has a tough job, just as you have a tough job, Mr. Huffman, just as you do. We all have tough jobs. I found him to be a good, decent man. He's working with a broken system that we have not fixed, to borrow some Texas terminology. And what do you do when you have the system that we've neglected? So I thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. My colleague and friend from Texas, Representative Pfluger, is recognized for 5 minutes for the question.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for letting me wave onto this committee. Mr. Huffman, thank you for your service. I'll get right into it. Assistant Secretary, how long have you been the Assistant Secretary for immigration policy?
Officially since, I believe, April, but I was acting in this role since October of 2021.
Okay. Can you tell me the number of apprehensions since January of 2021?
Don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I believe the number is somewhere in the 3.5 million range.
I don't have the document, Mr. Chairman, but that sounds about 2 million short. Apprehensions on the southwest border, and I'll yield to you if you can back me up, about 5.5 million.
Is the gentleman referencing for the total number of encounters and apprehensions?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I would say that's 3.5 million is low.
I'm sorry, I meant the last 2 fiscal years. I think if you're counting from January, that's probably a little bit higher than
how
that.
do those compare to the 4-year period between 2017 and beginning of 2021?
It is higher.
Twice, 3, 4, 5 times higher?
It is significantly higher.
Okay. Would you consider that a success for the department?
You know, we have seen over the last few years, again, as I said, these surges in migration under presidents of both parties. This is not a new phenomenon. This is not something that is solely the purview of one party or the other.
No, but Assistant Secretary, the numbers indicate a story out here. Would you consider that a success for our country?
I don't believe that, you know, what we have seen at the border is a success
I agree
anybody.
with that.
Going back more than a decade.
That might be the first answer that I've agreed with DHS on our border in the last three years since I've been here. It's not a success. Title 42 is not the answer. This was a Band-Aid fix. And it goes to the point where I meet with Mr. Huffman's officers, and it doesn't matter if I'm in Del Rio or El Paso, McAllen, or Laredo, Eagle Pass, or my hometown of San Angelo. It really doesn't matter. The thing that keeps coming back, every officer, every Border Patrol, Customs agent, or ICE agent says these words, and I quote, "There are no consequences." And without consequences, there's chaos. And the chaos that we're seeing is fentanyl, 100,000+ deaths, trafficking of humans, 53 people who died in a tractor trailer south of San Antonio in July. And so to your answer, I'm disappointed that you don't actually know the number as the Assistant Secretary. That number should be ingrained, cold. It should be, you should know that number, and you should be able to add it up today for the crossings, the apprehensions today. You should be able to have a running counter today. And that's the problem with this administration, is that the tragedies that are happening to us in my community, in Odessa, Texas, where we had the police chief here 2 weeks ago, we are feeling the impact of this. Without rules, there is chaos. Would you say that after Title 42 ended and Title 8 was reverted to, DHS has noted that aliens may qualify for an exception, and even if they don't use a lawful pathway, would you say that do aliens who use the alleged lawful pathways need a legal basis to enter, or can anyone enter the United States at this point?
Going back to my previous comments, sir, I would note that Title 42 did not allow us to place consequences at the border. To your point, we need consequences on unlawful entry in order to deter unlawful migration. That is why we've implemented the circumvention of lawful pathways rule, which does place common sense conditions on asylum eligibility, but we need Congress to act here, or there will never be a success on our border.
You need Congress to act here. Assistant Secretary, we passed the most comprehensive border security package in the history of Congress. We have acted. That is one of the most outrageous statements that I think I've ever heard.
We need Congress to act in a bipartisan manner to fix this problem. Neither party is going to solve this on its own.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I am having trouble.
I indulge the gentleman.
We passed H.R. 2 and have acted. What this country needs is the political will to enforce the laws that are already on the books. In fact, the gentleman sitting next to you as commissioner has 19,000 Border Patrol agents that are currently out there ready to give their lives, and they are saying that there are no consequences because Remain in Mexico, MPP, has not been adhered to, because the political will to engage with our allies and our partners in countries to the south of us has not been adhered to. We had policy that deterred, and without deterrence, we will see a massive surge. So I take great offense to the fact that you're telling me that you think Congress should act and that that's the problem. I couldn't disagree with you more. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. It's been an engaging committee hearing. We have shared insightful and I think well thought out perspectives from both sides. The ranking member and I are friends, and we will continue to discuss this. I thank the witnesses for their testimony today, and I thank the members for their questions. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses. We would ask that the witnesses respond to these questions if presented to you in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7 Delta, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.